You have brought shame upon this village. The gods demand your life.
The scandal sheets of Denver had a field day with the story of Adelaide Blackwell, a young woman of considerable beauty, charm, and social standing, daughter of a wealthy railroad magnate, who had dared to fall in love with the wrong man. Not wrong because he was poor or unsuitable, but wrong because he was already promised to another. The man in question was Robert Sterling, a congressman's son with impeccable credentials, and a fiancé from an equally prestigious family. Adelaide's indiscretion, a stolen kiss at a garden party, witnessed by 3 prominent socialites, had been enough to destroy her entire world. The engagement between Robert and his intended bride was quietly maintained. The scandal, however, was anything but quiet. Within weeks, Adelaide Blackwell had become the cautionary tale whispered about in Denver's drawing rooms. A woman of loose morals, a homewrecker, a disgrace to her family name. Her father, humiliated by the association with her transgression, had cut her off financially and socially. Her mother, fearing ostracism by association, had ceased to acknowledge her daughter in public. Her former friends, women she had grown up with, confided in, supported through their own scandals, suddenly had no time for her. And so Adelaide, at 24 years old, found herself cast out from the only world she had ever known. She had taken a position as a lady's companion to a wealthy widow in Georgetown, a mining town nestled in the mountains west of Denver. It was degrading work, attending to an elderly woman's every whim, managing her household, enduring her sharp tongue and constant criticism. But it was all that was available to a woman with her reputation. The widow, Mrs. Eleanor Croft, was particularly cruel to Adelaide, seeming to take pleasure in reminding her of her fall from grace. "You should thank me for employing you," Mrs. Croft would say with a sharp laugh. "No respectable family would touch you with a 10-foot pole. You're lucky I'm willing to overlook your moral failings in exchange for cheap labor." Adelaide endured this without complaint. She had learned that complaint only invited more cruelty. She had learned that attempting to explain herself or defend her reputation only gave people ammunition to use against her. She had learned that once society deemed you disposable, the only path forward was silence and submission. This was her existence when the mountain man arrived in Georgetown. His name was Jacob Mercer, and he was a solitary figure who lived in a cabin high in the Rocky Mountains, surviving through trapping, hunting, and occasional trading with the townspeople of Georgetown. He was in his mid-40s, weathered and scarred, with dark eyes that had seen hardship and loss. He came to town perhaps 4 times a year to sell furs and purchase supplies, and he rarely engaged in conversation beyond what was necessary. On one of these supply runs, Jacob found himself at the general store at the same time Adelaide was there, purchasing items from Mrs. Croft. He noticed her immediately, not because of her beauty, though she was undeniably beautiful, but because of the careful way she moved through the store as to try and take up as little space as possible. The way she spoke to the shopkeeper in a voice barely above a whisper. The way her eyes remained downcast, as if she was afraid of being noticed. He watched as Mrs. Croft arrived and began berating Adelaide in front of the other customers. "You took too long," Mrs. Croft snapped. "I've been waiting for 20 minutes. You're as useless as you are immoral. Pick up those packages and try not to drop them, though knowing your incompetence, I'm sure you will." Adelaide simply nodded and gathered the packages without a word. But Jacob saw something in her face, a flicker of pain quickly suppressed, a dignity being maintained through sheer force of will. That evening, he found himself asking questions of the general store owner, a man named Harrison who had known Jacob for years and respected his quiet nature. "That woman with Mrs. Croft," Jacob said casually. "Who is she?" Harrison's expression shifted to something like pity. "That's Adelaide Blackwell. She's from Denver originally. Wealthy family, beautiful, educated. Got herself into some kind of scandal a while back. Word is she fell for some engaged man. Now she's persona non grata in Denver society, working as a companion to that miserable old widow. It's a shame, really. She seems like a decent person." Jacob said nothing more, but something in him recognized something in her. Perhaps it was the way she had borne the public humiliation without striking back. Perhaps it was a quiet strength evident in her posture, despite the heaviness of her circumstances. Or perhaps it was simply that he understood what it meant to be judged harshly by society and found wanting. He began coming into Georgetown more frequently. He would engineer encounters with Adelaide, arriving at the general store when he knew she would be there, pausing to speak with her while Mrs. Croft was distracted. At first, Adelaide was suspicious of his attention. Men didn't approach women with ruined reputations unless they had dishonorable intentions. But Jacob was different. He never made improper advances. He never flirted or suggested anything inappropriate. He simply saw her. He asked her opinions about books. He inquired about her thoughts on the mountains and the territory. He treated her as a person worthy of respect and conversation. One afternoon, when Adelaide was collecting water from the mountain stream near Mrs. Croft's house, Jacob appeared as if by chance. "Miss Blackwell," he said, his voice quiet and gentle. "May I help you with that water?" "No, thank you," Adelaide replied, not meeting his eyes. "I'm perfectly capable." "I'm sure you are," Jacob replied, "but I'd like to help regardless. If you'll permit me." There was something in his tone that made refusal feel impossible. Adelaide allowed him to take the heavy water bucket, and as they walked together along the stream, something shifted in the carefully maintained walls she had built around her heart. "You're kind to me," Adelaide said finally, her voice barely audible. "I don't understand why." Jacob set down the bucket and turned to face her fully. "Because I've been discarded by society, too," he said simply. "After my wife died, I couldn't bear to live in civilization anymore. Couldn't bear the judgment, the expectations, the way people looked at me with pity. So I went to the mountains, built a life where I didn't have to apologize for my existence or my past. And I've watched society enough from a distance to know that it's often cruel to people who don't deserve its cruelty." He paused, and his eyes, dark and unflinching, looked directly into hers. "I don't know what happened in Denver, and frankly, I don't care. What I know is that I see a woman of intelligence, compassion, and quiet strength, a woman who deserves far better than being spoken to like she's nothing. That's what I see, Miss Blackwell. Not a scandal, not a disgrace, a woman worth knowing." Adelaide felt tears prickling at her eyes. No one in months, perhaps years, had spoken to her this way, as if she was a person, as if she had value beyond her reputation. Over the following weeks, Jacob and Adelaide spent more time together. He would arrange to encounter her on her walks, bringing books for them to discuss, asking her about her life before the scandal, listening without judgment as she told him her story. He never once expressed romantic intentions, but something between them was building. A connection deeper than attraction, a genuine respect and understanding. Mrs. Croft, noticing Adelaide's improved demeanor and correctly suspecting the source, became even more vicious. "I see you making a fool of yourself with that mountain hermit," she hissed one evening. "You think he respects you? You think any man respect a woman with your history? He's simply amusing himself with you. Once he tires of you, he'll disappear back to his mountains, and you'll be left with nothing, as is appropriate for someone like you." Adelaide said nothing, but her heart twisted with the fear that Mrs. Croft might be right. Jacob was a good man, too good for a woman like her. Eventually, he would realize his mistake. But Jacob had other plans. He arrived at Mrs. Croft's house on a cold November morning with a letter in his hand and a proposition on his lips. "Miss Blackwell," he said formally, "I would like to offer you employment. My cabin in the mountains needs a housekeeper and a manager. The position comes with fair wages, your own room, and complete autonomy in managing the household operations. There is no requirement for anything beyond professional respect and honest work." Mrs. Croft, alarmed at losing her cheap labor, immediately objected. "She's bound to me for another 6 months by contract." "I'll pay out the remainder of her contract," Jacob interrupted calmly, producing a stack of bills. "And I'll pay it generously. Miss Blackwell is free to go if she chooses." Adelaide looked between them, at the cruel woman who had made her life miserable, and the man who was offering her escape. It felt too simple, too good to be true. But something in Jacob's steady gaze told her that he was offering exactly what he had stated: employment, respect, and freedom. "Yes," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in months. "Yes, I'll accept your offer." The cabin in the mountains was small but beautiful, nestled in a valley surrounded by towering peaks. It was a place of profound quiet and genuine peace. Adelaide settled into work that was meaningful, maintaining a home, organizing supplies, managing the practical operations of mountain living. And more importantly, she settled into a life where she was valued for her competence and her character rather than judged for her past. Winter came to mountains, and as snow piled high and the world grew quiet, Jacob and Adelaide found themselves spending long evenings by the fire, talking about books and philosophy and life. Slowly, carefully, something deeper began to bloom between them. One evening, as they sat watching the fire, Jacob took her hand. "Adelaide," he said, "when I first saw you in Georgetown, I saw a woman the world had discarded. But I also saw something else. I saw a woman of genuine worth that had nothing to do with society's judgment. Over these months, I've come to care for you deeply. Not because you're beautiful, though you are. Not because you're accomplished, though you are. But because you're good. Because you're kind. Because you deserve to be treasured. And I would like to spend the rest of my life doing exactly that." He pulled out a simple ring, nothing fancy, but crafted with obvious care. "I'm not offering this because society expects it or because it improves either of our standing. I'm offering it because I love you, and I want you to know that somewhere, someone sees your true worth. Will you marry me?" Adelaide said yes through tears, and in the spring of 1892, they were married in a small ceremony in Georgetown, witnessed only by the shopkeeper Harrison and his family. Word quickly spread through Denver society that the disgraced Adelaide Blackwell had married a mountain man and disappeared into the wilderness. Some whispered that she'd gotten what she deserved. Others, particularly the women who had also been victims of society's cruelty, understood that she had actually gotten something far more valuable, a man who saw her true worth. Years passed. Adelaide and Jacob built a quiet, meaningful life in the mountains. They became known in the territory for their kindness to travelers and those in need. They never had biological children, but they took in several orphans and young people who had been rejected by society, giving them the same gift Jacob had given Adelaide, the belief that their true worth had nothing to do with what society thought of them. When Adelaide died at 65, Jacob scattered her ashes in the valley she had come to love, and he whispered a promise to mountains, that he would spend the rest of his days reminding people, particularly women deemed disposable by society, that they possess worth beyond measure, that society's judgment was not the final word on a person's value, that sometimes the most profound treasures were found among those the world had discarded.